All right. Hey, y'all. Lindsay here with a Fearless Life interview series. I have a freaking awesome guest today. I actually know her from high school, which is super cool. I've known her for a very long time, since I was a wee little girl. Her name is Hannah Woebkenberg. She is currently residing in Oakland, California. She is an ER doctor out there. I think she also works at a hospital or two in San Francisco. We'll have to check in with her about that. But the coolest thing about her life, so she's not only an incredible, fearless ER doctor, she's also an artist as well. So she has this amazing balance of these two different lives that she just balances within her world and lives simultaneously. So I absolutely love that about her, and I'm so inspired about that. But most of all, she's this amazing warrior adventurer, just this spirit that will go off and go for a journey, oftentimes alone, an adventure into the wilderness, anywhere she chooses and wants to go. So we'll get to a little bit of all of that today. But welcome, Hannah. It is so freaking fabulous to have you
Hello.
here.
Thank
All right.
you. Thank you for having me. I feel honored. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely, girl. It's my pleasure. You absolutely inspire me. So I'm so excited to have you. All right, let's kick this off with just tell us a little bit of a backstory about your life. We went to high school together in Jasper, Indiana. So we grew up in the Midwest. How did you went through med school. How did you end up out in California? What was that process like?
Yeah, it's a bit of a journey, but it seems interesting. Um, I did all of my training and college in Indiana, and that's when I started the fell upon this magical balance you speak of this um, creating art and balancing it with practicing medicine. And went, much to many's dismay, made it into medical school in Indiana, finished those 4 years. And then, I had always in mind for some reason that I wanted to be in California without really having like a palpable, conscious, like knowing of why. But in that process, I ended up doing my emergency medicine training in Atlanta because they have another fantastic training institution, really inner city, county, giant hospitals. And then after that, it just seemed like the right move to move to California. And knowing that the one time I had visited the Bay Area, this real palpable art vibe and free thinking and just this sort of acceptance to those who are thinking maybe out of the norm boxes. So there was some degree of maybe that attracted me on my one visit here. And moved here, got a job after residency. Um, been working mostly in the Bay Area, although I have scattered some of my work to Montana and Southern California and did some international work within that time period. And then through the last, maybe I've been practicing medicine 10 years already. And in that time period, I've now feel like I fell upon this sweet, sweet balance of how to craft my career in a way that, again, finds myself in balance. So I work at 4 different hospital institutions. I work about 10 to 12 days a month. And that can be hugely flexed. So because I have the benefit of working at 4 different institutions, 4 different scheduling timeframes, I give everyone exactly the days I'm going to work. And when I don't want to work, I don't have to work. If I don't want to work nights, I don't have to work nights. I keep it strictly to like going to my job, doing my job, and sign off. There's a mean like art since college and have maybe sold over 500 pieces. So that's been an active process the whole time along the way. And currently just writing that sweet space and having now the luxury of time to explore other things I'm interested in. So
That's amazing. So when you say explore other things you're interested in, what are some of those things? I'm curious. I know you told me a little bit about natural medicine, or maybe it was Ayurveda. I can't remember, but
yeah,
is that a part of your journey now?
Yeah, certainly for my own, when I've gone into what are my own personal truths and how I want to live my life, yeah, I've come to more of a food as medicine approach and found my beliefs to align with Ayurveda. So I have done some studies with the Dhyana Center in Sebastopol to study Ayurveda with Dhyana. And that's been a really beautiful journey. So I have done that. I've spent significant time with that. I've also spent significant time in natural building. I took a month off and went to the Earthship Academy down in Taos, New Mexico, and did another month building an Earthship in Nepal with a collective of people from around the world. So having that luxury to time, because nope's gone for 2 to 3 days. So I get into that. And then I've also gotten more into, I guess, what's gone into like more of like my personal work would be in the more of conscious living, which has found me more in the world of Tantra in the way of, in the way I define as Tantra. I feel like that's relevant in the world of now to define what we mean by Tantra. Uh,
Yeah.
but in the way I see Tantra as living this life fully to my human capabilities. And then that is using my senses to interpret my experience around me. So really being engaged in the present moment, using my sense of touch, my vision, and being with my surroundings. So those are some of the things I've explored recently.
That's absolutely incredible. So, is there a plan for the future to kind of meld everything that you've learned, all your experiences, into something like a service you can offer people or something of that nature? Or what's your ultimate vision or outlook for the future? Or is there none? Is it just, I'm interested in that, so I want to learn in that? I'm curious.
Yeah. Yeah. Overall, at the current time, I haven't, I feel like for the most part, I set a couple goals in life, and maybe one of those was to be a doctor. Beyond that, I haven't really subscribed to that goal oriented nature. It always felt really restrictive and rather disappointing if I set these like grand goals that I've now accomplished. If I'd set these goals, it'd been maybe probably too overwhelming to understand the how if I had created all those expectations. So I don't do as much of the goal oriented, although I have had some recent thoughts around like more of a holistic healing center, because I think, I'm definitely privileged to see the dysfunction in the Western healthcare system and our culture around health and wellness. And also, finding myself in some more alternative, although let's be real, Ayurveda existed before Western medicine did.
True that.
And earth medicines definitely existed before Western medicine. So alternative.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the privileges that I'm coming from this background of I'm coming from this background of acceptance that Western medicine isn't the only way to approach health and wellness, and Chinese medicine isn't the only way. And I just think there's just many ways. And so I'm more in the inclusive approach. And I think there would be an interesting shift to really be able to support all the systems in the move, is that we need to all be working together. So that's sort of been something in a way that I could tie together wellness, because wellness is in all of the things I'm interested in, although some are with, how I live with the earth versus how I live with myself.
I love that. So, I'm just curious. You said like you recognize a little bit of dysfunction in Western medicine, which I think there's a little dysfunction in everything in general in life if we look deep enough. But
Yes.
like, do you integrate, in the ER, do you integrate like natural ways of medicine or Ayurvedic into your daily practice in the ER with patients, or is that something that you kind of keep separate? I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, I've definitely begun to integrate it because people are seeking. And I think we've created a culture over the years of there being this external source to our wellness, this pill, this medicine. And though medicines are great for some things, don't get me wrong, I'm not an anti-medicine person. I do prescribe medicines, but they're good for some uses. But we've created a culture around this pill that this something outside of myself that's going to fix my. So I think really breaking down that culture and shifting it out of and re-empowering us to come back within ourselves, and we can have some ways to heal ourselves. So with the amount of anxious people in the world, I think we have a lot of anxious people. We have a lot of anxiety everywhere, and we're all feeling it. And it's a very common complaint to the emergency room. It's a very common presentation of physical ailments, right? So even if I don't know for sure that it's part of it, if I can sense that there's some degree of anxiety or somebody is needing something, I have a personal packet that I put together for my patients because it's so common. I mean, I got tired of seeing like 7-year-olds suicidal, right? And like not really having resources for them. Our Western healthcare psychiatric system is over inundated with life and death, psychiatric illnesses. There isn't the time for the people who are like screaming and desiring like help to be able to do something and make that transition before getting to the life or death, right? So I came up with a packet of things that I've done for myself and just keep it real. I kind of tune into maybe what might be helpful. Obviously, I think important with anxiety, a couple different things is quieting the mind. So I go into a lot of breath work practices. I have a couple go-to that are kind of printed out and word by word. Seeing movement really important for anxiety and trauma holdings, moving our bodies with intention. So I keep it really simple depending on where the person is, but I have a list of meditations, movement practices. Another aspect that's been important for me is my daily affirmations and writing out really who I desire to be, and having the list and having it memorized as an anchoring point when things are feeling a little bit off. So I discuss that. Maybe I discuss changing our perspective, right? Because we can be overwhelmed by what we're fed as what's happening in this world. And I talk a lot about like balancing the perspective between positive media and negative media, and that perhaps there's just as many good things happening in the world. If we anchor ourselves to our own reality, you can witness it very easily. So just sort of
That's super powerful. I think you hinted on
changing our
oh, sorry, girl.
No, you're good. You're good.
Sorry, the video does, or your video does keep cutting out a little bit. So I think we're just a little bit off on the pause and the feedback and all of that. So I didn't mean to interrupt you. But I love this idea of anxiety, and I kind of want to keep on this for a minute, just because it's a massive thing in our world right now. And I love that you're bringing this idea of like breath work in, and meditation or awareness of the thoughts and the mind, and also in regards to what we're taking in our lives. So, there is so much negativity bombarding us day in and day out if we do follow mainstream media and the news. But like you said, there is so much positive in the world. For people that are potentially experiencing anxiety or overwhelm in their life right now, is there any advice you could give them, or I know you mentioned some tools like daily affirmations, but anything else tool-wise that you can provide them that comes to mind?
Yeah, I think the most important is, finding an anchoring point within self. So I think a really easy tool that we all have access to all the time is really to go to nature and be with, and that pulls us into that present moment, that sweet space of what this is about, and that sweet space of when we're in the present moment, then it's fighting our minds. So I think the easiest one we could do is just go outside, find a butterfly, follow it, or climb a tree, really get into the bark, see what's going on inside the bark, watch the ants for a while.
Love that.
I find that to be one of my most beneficial when I'm feeling, I think in the anxious mind, there senses to be like this spiral and sense of deconnectivity, and with the present moment and anchoring to nature, there's both this stillness in the connectivity. Yeah.
Amazing. So before we jumped on the call, we were kind of talking about recharge and rebooting, because I can imagine with working as an ER doctor in 4 different hospitals, and then also an incredible artist, and that taking a tremendous amount of your time as well. it can be easy to get burned out sometimes or find that balance because things can sometimes get out of balance. So what are your personal techniques? I know you said, go off and you're kind of a loner when you recharge, but I'm curious, what does that look like? Is it an adventure? Is it going into nature, or what does that look like for you?
Yeah. So my personal adventures, which is something of more of like a daily maintenance, or not a daily maintenance, a daily maintenance, yes. Also my solo, also these bigger adventures, I found that I am a little bit more adventurous when I only have to rely on, my own uh basically my own self, right? I don't have to account for anybody else if I do risky things or whatnot.
Yes,
So
I
this
love it.
so this most recent adventure, and adventures are usually based on sort of, I set a loose intention to just sort of explore. It's usually car camping. I don't like to plan a lot, so I don't plan a lot. I usually set sort of where I'm gonna end. I head out on a road trip, and maybe what I'm exploring, and one of the most kind of my biggest landmark now is hot springs. So I have a couple where all the hot springs and pools are, the primitive ones you can just hike to and relax in. And so I use those as sort of spots along the way. Maybe I go towards a tree. Recent road trip, I went toward the bristlecone pine trees in Great Basin National Park because I really like hanging out with trees too. So that was sort of a goal point. So this time I also did a lot of dispersed camping, which is my ideal, just kind of going out, finding a spot, camping, if it's safe, making a fire and enjoying some food from the fire. Otherwise, just laying low and visiting hot springs, hiking. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so is there ever a point in your life where you just felt completely out of balance, completely overwhelmed, like you wanted to give up? And if there was, like, what got you through that?
Not a nice question. I don't. The giving up thing doesn't really resonate as much with me. I have like moments of that, and all just sort of assess if it's serving a scheme. I don't necessarily have that sense of giving up. There has been one time where I felt that burnout, I think that you spoke of previously,
Yeah.
associated with health care, which is so common. And I was really surprised. It took me about
Hey,
3 years of
Hannah,
practicing,
hey,
and I felt
can
the signs of
you
burnout. Yeah.
can you turn off your video and say that again? I think that it's using too much of, it keeps cutting out really, really bad. So wonder if that will help.
Okay.
Okay. Hey, are you there?
Yeah.
Okay. I want to be able to see you, but
Yeah.
okay,
Let me
there we go.
try one more thing.
Okay,
Let's try
cool.
one more thing, maybe. Let me try just using cellular.
It was just cutting out a little bit before, but then it got into a really rough spot. So
Let's see how this goes. I don't know where. There you are.
yay.
All right.
Hopefully that'll
Should we
work.
try that?
Yeah,
I
let's
don't
try
know.
that. We'll give it a go. And if it doesn't work, I'll just stop you. Maybe we can cut off your video. Maybe it's requiring too much of the okay, you were gonna hit on that point of where once in your life you ran
Oh,
or
burnout.
yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. So there was one time maybe it took me about 3 years after training only, before I experienced the burnout associated with medicine, which is super common. I was surprised to experience it so early,
Yeah.
because I loved my job. I loved what I was doing. I still do. I love interacting with the wide range of people that I'm working with. I love the fascination of the human body as a piece of artwork. I love taking care of it. I love aiding people in their wellness and their healing path. all aspects of it I loved. So in that moment, there was a discordance. There was this, like, logically this should work, and in reality it wasn't working. And so at that point, this is kind of how I approached it. I took it to, like, okay, I need to keep track. What is making this not a good experience for me? So I kept a journal. What days were good and what days were bad. And then I wrote, like, why did they feel good? Why did they feel bad? Because I'm in the field of emergency medicine, where a lot of variables are pretty random. So overall, from day to day, the it didn't really, and when I correlated things out, it basically didn't correlate if I had a annoying patient or a hard or challenging patient to work with, or one that, assaulted me or anything. It didn't really deal with that. It didn't correlate with when I thought that the triggers were when I had, consultants that were difficult to work with. But it didn't really correlate with that. It didn't correlate with whether or not I worked that day either. And I was like, huh. So it ended up boiling down to what I considered to be a good or bad day at the end of the day was based on how I was performing throughout that day, how I responded to the triggers, how I responded to other people's, lack of regard for patient care or whatever it may be that were challenging me in those days. Those were all sort of scattered throughout. But the real trend was actually how I felt I responded to it. And when I was a little snappier, I felt like it was a bad day. When I held my
Yeah.
ground and I held my calm, it was a good day. And I was like, this is me. This is on me. Okay, so these are the things that are lending to me to be a little more irritable versus not. What can I do now to shift my situation to provide for a more balanced and well-being approach in it? So I look at it kind of two ways, in that one way I needed to see, what in my surroundings can I shift? Okay, well, it probably doesn't help working too much. And for me personally, triggers were the system issues related to medicine with each hospital system. And so hence why I was like, okay, if I shift to working at 4 different institutions and I only do a few days at each, by the time one is kind of getting a little frustrating, I leave and I'm not back for a month. And then I go to a different one that has a totally different system issues. And then I leave and cycle through. And then another aspect is working less. It's paradoxical because we're trained that if we can help more, we should help more. And that sweet space of helping is complicated, and much more complicated than I feel like people lend to, like, what is helping. But for me, I discovered that I had more quality to my care as a doctor if I worked 10 days a month than if I worked 18 days a month. 18 days a month was getting me much more irritable, not keeping my calm, not feeling good at the end of the day, not allowing myself time to really go into these anxiety talks with these patients and really give them the extra energy that I have. So kind of shifting the external surroundings a little bit, tweaking it. And then also, what inside myself do I need to do to hold my anchor? So I instituted more intentional practices around sort of washing my hands with, removing the energy associated with working with the patients and whatever I may be absorbing during those times, and having a little more intentional clearing, to also just really staying attuned to my daily maintenance practices to keep myself well, so that I may be charged fully for work.
That's amazing. So basically, it kind of all started with awareness. And I love the fact that you came back to, oh, it's me being triggered. It's not my external circumstances. So what am I going to do about it? And I love that.
Yeah.
So, I think a lot of people find themselves in this area, and I want to hint on this or like stay on this just a little bit further, because it's like a lot of people do find themselves in a place of burnout. And then it's easy to just like give up and walk away. And instead of giving up and walking away, you are more action oriented towards taking charge, identifying the trigger, and then changing your life in order to create it the way that suits you the best. So you almost designing your life in the way that suits you and your personality and your way of wanting to be in the world. So how do you do that? Like you talked about it, but like, can you talk about the importance of taking action towards, not only identifying something, but then the action towards actually creating it in your life? That's a loaded
the
question,
the
but
the process of manifestation of my own reality.
yeah. Well, that's the whole
I'm
thing is
very,
like there's
yeah,
manifestation, right? We create it in our minds and we visualize it. And I love that. But I'm a huge proponent of inspired action, or not even inspired action, but taking action. And action isn't always inspired. It's just like something that we need to do to make something happen, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
um,
yeah.
you know,
Totally.
can you talk a
So I've
little bit about
definitely,
that?
yeah, I think I've been certainly asked this question of my process of manifestation. And it's always intrigued me when I witness people and their ability of it. I think for me, it comes back to the brilliance of art and creativity. And I think the simplest way to explain it is like, okay, like I'm going to draw a picture of a tree, and I may attach some like visual aspects to that tree when I'm creating that. I want to create a tree moment. Um, and then for me, I find if I spend too much time in how that tree is going to look, I might tell myself I'm probably not qualified to make that tree, and I
Mm,
may stop before the process. And I think that's where the holdup in actually getting the reality. So what I find works better is then I just say I'm going to make a tree. I don't attach too much detail to what that tree is going to look like. It's not going to be a specific type of tree. It's just going to be a tree. What do I need to make a tree? Well, I need something to write on, and I need a utensil to write with. So I need at least two things to get started. I don't plan out all the details around if it's going to be framed or matted or whatever that. No, just I need two things to start. And I grab those, and I don't need to know what a tree looks like. I know that it has a trunk, so I'll just start with a straight line and then let it flow. And at the end, I have a picture of a tree. And I think it's like a sort of that balance between vision it intention to like make something,
yeah.
to like balancing it with the action and the flow that goes with it without like being too much on the details. And I think that's kind of how I feel about this goal making, right? I don't like goal too much, attach too much to that like outcome,
Mm.
and just let it more have that balance of action and flow.
Yes. Woo! I
Yeah.
love it. I love it. All right, girl, let's talk a little bit about fear. I don't want the interview to go too long, but we have about 5 to 10 more minutes. So, um, tell me, because you work in these, well, first of all, you make art and you show it to the world, which is incredible. It's a creative expression, in my life, I've found fear around that at some points of using my voice or putting myself out in the world or my creativity out in the world. So that A is incredibly inspiring. And then B, the fact that you are working in an ER, in 4 different ERs, and you're facing a lot of like, I don't know what comes through there, but I can imagine that it's intense sometimes. So can you just, if you want to, you can share a time where, fear came into your life or maybe held you back from doing something or something that you had to face. But also I would love to know just what's your strategy towards being fearless? Because I see you as a very fearless human being. I'm sure you do have some fears, but you are very courageous.
Thank you. Yeah, the fear question. Of course, this came up with my mind because of your logo. So
Mhm.
I was like, oh, interesting. All right, let me think through this here. I do have a very recent, a couple of years ago, maybe, experience of feeling fear, and it was new to me in the actual emotion of feeling it. I think there's layers of what we define fear to be, and I don't really spend a whole lot of time in fearing things that are actually not threats. But okay, so recently I went on a like midnight hike in my neighborhood in West Oakland, and I sought this hike or this little walk because I had actually got bailed on by this guy, and I was feeling a little bit disrespected in my time. I was seeking some answers around boundaries, uh, and skunks have presented themselves before for me for boundaries. So
Mhm.
anyway, I just went for a walk. I was walking my normal path to my park that has my favorite climbing tree, and I was headed there. And I pause and I look up and I see 3 skunks in front of me. And I keep looking around me and I count 12 skunks
Oh my God.
in the park. And I'm like, how did I end up walking to the middle of them? So I sit down, because what else am I going to do? I'm going to sit down. So I sit down in the middle of the park and I'm going to watch. I'm going to see what happens, because this is a wild experience, I'm thinking. And skunks, they're such beautiful creatures, right? They're stunning. They have these dramatic hair.
Yeah.
Not saying I'm a skunk or anything, but
they're amazing.
Yeah. And they demand respect. They have a very strict boundary. And the association with them is a little bit of fear. So while I'm watching, these young boys come from like the left side of the park, and there's like 3 of them, and they're talking about the skunks, and they come to me and they say, "Whoa, why are you just sitting here? Aren't you afraid?" And at that moment, I was like, no, that really hadn't registered. I just assumed that if I respect these boundaries that I know the skunk to have, that I'm not going to get sprayed. So I'm going to respect them, and I'm hoping they'll respect me, is what I told these kids. And they moseyed on. They did mention they were going to mess with the skunks, but they did not. And then they carried on. A few minutes later, these cats came into view, and these cats were on the right side, and they were playing and bantering and doing all these cat things. And then it's like one of them saw the skunk, and they like crouched down and froze. They went into freeze mode, right? They crouched down, froze for about several minutes. And then they got up, walked maybe 15 feet, crouched down and froze again, and made their way across the park this way. And just about that time, I hear something behind me. And I'm like, oh, I thought I had sat close enough to the building that there wouldn't be skunks moseying behind me, but I hear chewing happening. Okay. And as I'm watching these skunks, I'm looking out, I hear chewing behind me. I'm trying to keep my cool. I'm looking ahead of me. I see the skunks. There's several in front of me. I think I closed my eyes for a moment as the skunk was behind me, and I opened my eyes, and there was like 3 in front of me, all within 5 feet of me. And what happens when a skunk is eating food at night is their tail raises. Well, I've also been told that when the tail raises, it sprays. So at that moment in time, something happened in my body, because I was actually close enough to see like the little sphincters. And I was like, raising their tail. And then I kind of got contracted in my muscles. Things got a little tight. I held my breath. My heart started racing. And I was like, what is this? And I was like, I think this is fear. Oh, right. But what happened next is that fear started circulating, and it was telling me to run, get away, right? Fear is telling you to flee. It was telling me to flee. But my logical mind was like, no, don't flee.
Yeah,
you're definitely going to get sprayed. So what I did in the moment was, but beyond when they turned around, I wasn't trying to make eye contact with these skunks. So I would close my eyes every once in a while and center myself, find my breath. And I needed to dissolve that fear, because I do believe that what we're feeling can attract other things that might sense that. So I didn't want them to sense into any fear. So I wanted to come back to a place of love. So I decided that I need to dissolve that fear. So I decided, well, what's the worst case scenario? I get sprayed. So my fear was getting sprayed. There's some social shaming. The fear was probably around the social shaming associated with getting sprayed. But nonetheless, I made friends with getting sprayed by the fact that I would be so special. I would have been able to see the spray coming from their anus, because I was that close. So I was like, okay, well, at least I could say that. So I sat there with them, observed them for maybe another like half an hour. They finally dispersed enough that as I walked off the park, I felt this like wave of exhilaration just like rush over my body. And it was this sort of beautiful realization in my journey with emotions, and fear being one of them, that, that as an emotion, it's there for a good reason. If I was fearless as a child, I'd probably be dead. We wouldn't be talking. But
Yeah.
recognizing its utility as an emotion, but just sitting with it. And that's what in that moment, right? It was like just sitting with my emotion and sitting with that fear and not necessarily allowing it to direct activity thereafter. So
Oh, girl, I love that. And I love that you said you said I connected in with my breath. And I think that's so important in the moment because sometimes
mm-hmm.
fear, comes in and this is a situation where there was more danger around you, right? But let's talk about like fear of public speaking or fear of, I don't know, whatever. There's so many fears, right? So you utilize your logical mind to overcome the fact that yes, there was a danger and you identified what the danger was, but you were able to sit back and say, and take a deep breaths and tap into your breath and say, okay, actually, if I run right now, I'm probably going to get sprayed. And if I run right now, there could be consequences. So I'm going to sit and wait this out. And I think that's really, really cool. But you had to go through that process. And so I don't know, I just find that incredibly powerful and useful for anyone
Yeah.
who's dealing with any kind of fear. Now, of course, if it's in the case of a lion chasing you or whatever, yeah, of course, run, right? But
It's appropriate to have some fear. I think the difference is fearing something that can actually, pose a threat to me versus these fears that people swim with that aren't actual real threats to the being. And once
yeah,
it's sort of just toyed with maybe the logical mind or some like work, it's like, oh, well, like I think, I grew up with those silly fears around spiders. And then all of a sudden I was like, wait, I'm fearing this for what reason? This thing is
yeah,
so small. It's definitely not going to harm me. It's definitely not going to kill me, unless it's a poisonous one. But let's be reasonable. But most of them are not. So I'm not. I'm no longer going around just smashing small creatures because just sort of questioning the fear and figuring out if it's a real threat or not is key.
yeah, that's huge. But first I think you're so right with that, but also first the awareness of, oh, this is a fear, because people are just so,
Yeah.
I gotta go, I gotta get out of here. And I totally
So
understand.
in
Yeah, we
emotion,
can't always
right? We're
identify
pausing.
between, oh, there's a tiger chasing me and I'm just really scared of this spider or whatever. It all feels
That's
the same,
true.
I think, in the brain and the body. So
Yeah, that's
it's kind
very
of that
true.
awareness first of, oh, okay, it's a spider. It's not, it's over there. It's not going to hurt me, but it's an interesting process and it takes a lot of awareness. So
Yeah.
thanks so much for
Yeah.
sharing that because that was really invaluable information. And I love that you said you connected in with your breath because I find that in like the most fear creating experiences, the breath is such a huge tool because it can really calm
Mhm.
the mind and the body for sure. So, all right, let's wrap this up with one
Yeah.
nugget of inspiration or wisdom or anything that you would like to leave with.
Hmm. That was such a hard one to distill
I know there's
all
so many.
down to one nugget.
One nugget. What's your nugget? What you got?
Um, hmm. I think for me, like one of my most longstanding mantras have really just been around balance and finding my own personal balance, and in realizing that my personal balance is constantly shifting and changing, and within that allows space for other people's balance points to be shifting and changing. So like that acceptance that everybody can have is going to have a different balance point in all relativities. So balance.
Beautiful. I love that. Hannah, thank you so much. I can't thank you
Thank
enough.
you, Lindsay,
I'm
for
so
having me.
grateful. And you're such an inspiration. Keep rocking it out, girl, because you're just,
Mm,
and I
thank
love,
you.
I'm gonna leave it with this. Like the way that you design your life is incredibly powerful. So it's just apparent that, recognizing what is working, what isn't working, finding that balance, and then incorporating it all. So thanks for all the
Mm-hmm.
inspiration and the wisdom. Really appreciate it.
No, thank you.
Yeah,
Appreciate you.
so y'all watching this, Hannah does have a website where you can find her art, and the links will be below or above the video, depending on where this is posted. And I'll also put her Instagram in so you can check out. She's got some great photos and just amazing work overall. So you should definitely check it out. All right, Hannah, thanks so much. Sending you
All
some
right,
love,
thank
girl.
you. Hmm.
Bye.